Hey YouTube, welcome back. MDEX Music here. We're going to continue our series, Reharm Techniques Series 2, right now by jumping into part 3 of Killing Me Softly with his song. So when we left off last time, we got all the way up to this D minor 7. The very next chord we're going to reharmonize is the G7 in measure 10. So what we're going to do with this G7 is turn it into B flat 7, and I'll tell you why in a second. First, let's get rid of this G7 and then plug in the same dominant region of the map, B flat 7, using the Lydian flat 7 chord scale. So why were we able to do that? What we had before was a G7. I'm actually have to go back because I want to show you something. What we had before was a G7. This dominant 7 chord already has a lot of tension in it. It actually has a tritone. That's what gives it a lot of its tension. So its function is basically that, tension. If I wanted to right click on this chord to see all the options I have, you'll see a lot of options with regard to dominant 7 chords because it's about tension. So you have a lot of notes that you can add to either exacerbate or exaggerate that tension. One of those tensions is this Mixolydian flat 9. So what I'm basically trying to say in a long-winded way is this dominant 7 chord here can become a flat 9 with no problems. No questions asked. You can always turn a dominant 7 chord into a flat 9, which creates a little overlap with a diminished chord, which we might get into later with our advanced series that we've been doing. Check that out if you haven't already. So what we're gonna do with that G7 flat 9 is basically now see that there are 2 tritones present. I already pointed out one earlier, the B and the F, the tritone that you get between the 3rd and the 7th. But now there's another one between the 5th and the flat 9 that we added. And with those 2 tritones, we have options with regards to other scales that share those tritones. And one other, I should say chords, other chords that share those tritones. And one other chord that shares that tritone of D and A flat, the one I just pointed out between the 5th and the 9th, is B flat 7. So that's what we're calling a tritone substitution. Basically the G7 flat 9 has a lot of tritones, or has 2 tritones that it has in common with a few other chords, and B flat 7 is one of them. So that's why the B flat 7 works as a substitution for the G7 or the G7 flat 9. But we've already included that in the next iteration of Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro down here with our tritone substitutions. So there's only 3 groupings of tritone substitutions because, like we said before, we mentioned earlier, they're kind of based on diminished chords. There's only 3 diminished chord note groupings, so that's why we only have 3 tritone substitution buttons down here. So if I hover over this first one, it highlights all of the notes within the first diminished chord grouping or tritone substitution. Basically, we can use those terms interchangeably that are within the current map that I have. So here's another grouping of notes and the chords that use those, and then down here. So right in that first grouping that I highlighted, you'll see that G7, B flat 7, and a couple other chords are all kind of possibly interchangeable, but definitely share some tritones. And so if you want to get a good quick shortcut to how to substitute this chord out using a tritone substitution, well, we've included it right here with this button. So that's why B flat 7, or that's how you could get the B flat 7 a little easier, even if you don't quite grasp the theory just yet. All right, so next after that B flat 7, we got a measures 11 and 12 with our C major 7 and our E7 flat 9. And we're just gonna take a risk with these 2 bars and do something maybe a little outside the box. And one of the first things that comes to mind, especially because we got some space to work with here, with there only being 1 chord in each measure. One thing that pops into mind is this idea of a passing diminished chord, or this thought you may have heard before of a 1 to a 2 and then a passing diminished into the 3. So we're going to start with that idea as a jumping off point for what we're about to do with these 2 bars. So now that we've got this sort of run-of-the-mill 1-2 passing diminished chord to 3 idea on the paper, what we have to do now is tweak it to make sure it works with our melody. And one of the first things we come up against is this G sharp in the melody and this E flat diminished chord that we put right there. So if I have E flat diminished and I have the melody note on top of it, it creates more dissonance than what we're looking for right now. So if I go to the drop-down menu on that chord where I found it in the map, I'll see some other options. And one of the options I see is E flat minor 7, which changes the chord scale to Dorian, which has our melody note in it. So now that chord works just fine. All right, so now that we've gotten in our E flat minor 7 with the Dorian chord scale underneath it, that includes our melody note. One thing we're kind of butting up against now is this sort of lack of resolution I get from the E minor 7 here to the A minor 7 on the next measure. So one thing I want to do to kind of maybe make that work is see our journey within the map, as we've always said, is sort of a clockwise movements around the map. If I can somehow arrive to that A minor 7 from the dominant region of the map, that'll put me in a more advantageous position. So one thing I can do to do that is basically that E flat minor 7 that we just plugged in from the dominant region of the map. It also exists, if I go to the complete view of the map, it also exists over here in the dominant region as a sub 2 chord, all right? And its chord scale is identical, both Dorian. So one thing I'm going to do is kind of reposition our location within the landscape without even changing the chord, right? So let's do that. We're going to edit this one out for basically the dominant region, the dominant version of the same chord, the sub 2 of 5. So now that I am in this region of the map, which is basically the subdominant and dominant areas related to G7, I have some options as to where I can go. So let's get rid of this E minor 7 that we had before as a part of our little passing diminished phrase. Swap it out for A flat 7. And now that I'm on this A flat 7, I can't go directly to it from A minor 7. I have to resolve that first. So on the 4th beat of this measure here, we're going to plug in the target of that A flat 7, the 5 chord, G7, and then that's going to resolve to the A minor 7. So this slightly breaks the harmonic rhythm idea that we spoke of in a previous video. But again, it's okay because it's in the middle of a moment of tension and release. It's at the end of a phrase, so we can kind of do that. All right, so let's take a listen to our new reharm that we just came up with today and see what it sounds like. So we know it might sound a little outside the box or a little weird at first, especially if you're accustomed to hearing the song a certain way. But you gotta take some risks when you're doing this, and you can't be afraid to experiment, see what works, what doesn't work. You may hear something that you didn't even anticipate, and it may end up sounding awesome to you in the end. But you'll never get there if you're thinking within a certain box or you're following certain rules that you may have been so accustomed to following your whole life. So take some risk when you're doing this, and if it doesn't work, you don't like it, you can always change it, all right? So that's it for today. Come back again next time as we continue with our reharmonization of Killing Me Softly. Like, subscribe, you know the routine. Smash on that like button, help us out if you feel so inclined. Thanks for watching.